Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Ehsan and I am delivering lectures this Ramadan of 2022 brought to you by Babul Ilm Bani Hashim Society of Mississuga, Ontario. The topic of our discussion has been societal well-being, which we've tried to discuss. We've tried to examine the roadmap to self-purification at the community level and not just at the individual level. Obviously, we have rights and obligations as an individual that impact us directly. But when you have duties towards others, with your neighbors, with your friends, with your family members, and towards community at large, those also have an impact on creating a just and a fairer society. And this is what we've been trying to examine throughout these days. Yesterday, we talked about how moderation is critical and emphasized in Islamic teachings, and how it also contributes to creating a much safer and an economically fair society. So today, we're going to continue that discussion, and we're going to specifically talk about how we can contribute towards creating an economically fair society. We're going to focus on this point. We are going to examine what the religious view is on wealth and its distribution, and what are some of the ways that are there in the religion itself that promotes an equal or a just distribution. We will also talk about the benefits at the end of a just and fairer distribution of wealth. As always, we'll start with the Quranic verse, chapter number 63, verse number 10. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wa anfiqu mimma razaqnakum min qabli an ya'tiya ahadakum al-mautu fayaqula rabbi lawla akhartani ila ajalin qaribin fa'asaddaqa wa akun minal salihin. I'm going to translate this: and spend from what we have provided you before that comes to any of you. Whereas he will say, my Lord, why did you not respite me for a short time so that I may have given, so that I might have given charity and become one of the righteous. So again, the verse clearly suggests that Allah Ta'ala is commanding people to make sure that we are spending when we actually have something to give, right? And not wait for the time when we will actually have a lot more, or when the debt comes to us. Because and then he talks about the person who is actually full of regret when, full of regret when he's not able to give charity. Now, one of the keywords is sadaqah that we will try to understand as well. These are some of the ways where Islam has actually encouraged an equal or a fairer distribution. I should say fairer distribution of wealth in a society. So sadaqah is one aspect, which literally means charity, and we'll talk in detail about these concepts. Zakah is another one, and its the literal meaning is alms tax. And lastly, it's khums, which basically means 1/5, right? So without further ado, let's talk about some of the situations that we see or we hear, when we watch news. So we are well aware of so many people around the globe who are just surviving, who are starving day in, day out. There are children and adults that are starving They're homeless. They do not have any shelter, and they're struggling really to fulfill their basic needs. They don't have enough food. They don't have enough money to put food on the table for themselves or their family. Um, and and then we see the other side of the extreme. We see how there are people with so much wealth that they cannot even understand what to use it for. There are people who are just waiting to buy the latest model of this phone that's gonna be released like tomorrow. There are people who are waiting for the latest car to get their hands on it. And then there is fashion that is changing every day, and they're willing to spend more and more money just to get a new look every single day, right? And some people are just trying to get more and more property and invest in more property and become even more richer, right? Now, when you study and you see those two extremes, think to yourself, is this fair? Is this the right way to live in a world um, where people are starving and every single day they don't have enough food, they don't have enough money to fulfill their basic necessities. And then on the other side, we see people who are, full of wealth, and they are just using their money for such things that definitely sound and seem very trivial when you compare it with the basic necessities of life. Now, the concept of the religion here, the concept of Islam here is that this should not be the case. There are ways defined within the teachings that encourage a more economically fair society. Islam believes that the follower should work hard to earn a lawful income, and that's a given. They should acquire wealth through hard work to honest means, and it respects the rights of individuals to have private ownership of stuff. Every man or woman has the right to benefit from the money they acquire. It's very much in line with human nature, motivates people to work hard, to achieve whatever they've thought for themselves, right? And it's also encouraged to actually own a house and have one's own business. All those things are actually there in Islam as well. But there is two important concepts to remember while we analyze this. Number one, as according to the teachings of Islam, only Allah is the actual and real owner of everything. So basically, the real ownership belongs to Allah. He's the creator of everything. Everything in the universe belongs to Him. In one of the verses, chapter number 2, verse number 284, Allah says, "Lillahi ma fis samawati wa ma fil ard." I translate, to Allah belongs whatever is in the heavens and whatever is in the earth. Right? It's a very famous Ayatul Kursi in which this verse is in and very clear about who is the real owner. It doesn't say, okay, only like a subset of things belongs to Allah, or, these are the things that do not belong to Allah. No, it's like everything, whatever is in the heavens and whatever is in the earth, the real ownership is of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then again, same chapter, which is Surah Baqarah, chapter number 2, verse number 29, say, هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا. It is He who created for you all that is in the earth. So again, he's talking about how He's the creator of all those things, and in this capacity, He's the owner of the universe. And obviously, in this capacity as the owner and the creator, Allah has actually allowed us to use, benefit from, and own all the things in this earth as well, right? And an analogy for this to make it more clear is that, like how a family owns a house and there are things inside the house, they buy it. The parents, they buy it and they own it officially on papers. But a young child, let's say, is living in the house and will refer to the house furniture and toys as my house, my bed, and my toys. but the actual property ownership obviously belongs to the adults in the house, right? They are formally the owner of all those things. And they can give and take away those things whenever they wish. But out of love and care for their child, they've actually provided this for their children. So similarly, Allah Ta'ala is actually the real owner of the things that we possess, and we are just here to use them responsibly in a way that Allah has commanded us to use it. But that was the first concept. Allah is the real owner. The second concept about ownership is that Islam strongly discourages wealth to be accumulated in the hands of few people. So there are very few rich people who have all the wealth in the world, and there are other human beings who are actually deprived of even their basic needs. Then this is strongly discouraged, and it hates a system where there are two distinct segments that are so far apart from each other, and there is one has access wealth, the other is starving. So definitely the teachings of Islam do not believe in the monopoly of the rich. It's very, very clear. And even in this verse again, let's go to chapter number 59, verse number 7, Surah Hashr. I'm just going to do the translation. It says, the spoils that Allah gave to his apostle from the people of townships are for Allah and the apostle, the relatives and the orphans, the needy and the traveler, so that they do not circulate among the rich, among you only. Again, he's talking about how the money, the wealth, should be circulating through the rank and file of a society. It shouldn't be accumulated in a few rich people. Everyone has a right to have, you know, a fairer distribution of wealth. And so in order to prevent the accumulation from happening, the religion has, the teachings of Islam has played some responsibility in creating this fairer society. And Allah discourages the wealthy from only thinking about themselves, from only thinking about what next car they can buy, what next fashion that they can adopt. There are various things. We are in the month of Ramadan. Ramadan is 1 month where we are blessed. And we know that one of the things that we understand through fasting is the people who are starving because they have no food, they have no money to put food on the table, they have no money to arrange for food for themselves or for their family, right? So Ramazan, for example, Ramadan is, or the month of Ramadan is, for example, one way of understanding and getting that compassion. But that's not the only way. If you strictly talk about the distribution of wealth, there are quite a few ways in which Islam has promoted, you know, distribution of wealth in a just way. And like I said, Allah really discourages the wealthy from only thinking about themselves. And so in one of the hadith of Qudsi, Allah says, the rich are my agents and the poor are my dependents, right? So basically, Allah is putting that responsibility on the rich folks to actually distribute the money amongst the poor. So, and basically, it's not expected that all members of a community would have equal amounts of wealth. Again, it's not about equality of wealth, but the expectation is that at least all human beings reach a level of independence where they're really free from want for at least their basic needs like food and shelter. Those are some of the very basic human needs. Okay, so now that we have understood what Islam has actually emphasized and why it has emphasized and which direction Allah Ta'ala wants his followers to go towards, we'll now try to examine what are some of the ways that are there in the teachings of Islam that promote this fairer distribution of wealth. And we talked about some 3 words there. We talked about sadaqah, we talked about zakah, and we touched on khums as well. So those are really the three ways to accomplish this goal of a more just society. And now we're going to get into the nitty-gritties to try to study in detail what all those things really are. So let's talk about sadaqah first. And sadaqah, as we know, literally means charity, right? And Islam teaches us to show care and compassion to the needy by giving charity. This is a moral and ethical obligation. It's really important for the followers of Islam to actually help other human beings, and not just through different acts of kindness, but also if you have wealth and you're seeing people who are poor and starving and not have enough food to provide for their basic necessities, then it's highly encouraged to do sadaqah. This, if there's no specific amount mentioned for sadaqah, but obviously Allah commands that people can give and should give whatever they can actually spare. So again, we'll refer to Surah Baqarah, chapter number 2, verse number 219. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ قُلِ الْعَفْوَ. And I translate this, and they ask you as to what they should spend, say all that is surplus. So again, a very insightful word. So Allah is actually saying that everything that is surplus, like it's not using like a subset of surplus or a smaller portion or this percentage or that percentage. It's like all that is surplus should be spent. Again, this is a very high level. Muttaqi people not only give when they have access, but they obviously share when they themselves are struggling, right? So, and there is actually a Quranic verse about that as well. That's Surah Imran, chapter number 3, verse number 124, and I translate, those who spend in ease and adversity and suppress their anger and excuse of the people, and Allah loves the doers of the good. So it's basically describing some of the qualities of the mu'mineen, and he says that they actually spend when they're going through a hardship, even when they're going through a hardship. It's not just in the times when they're happy and they have sufficient amount of wealth, or when they have surplus amount of wealth. They are actually even spending and giving in the way of Allah to other human beings when they are actually facing hardships themselves. Now, again, remember, if you want to look at the statistics as well, there is like a staggering number of people who are starving or who are poor. There is about 815 million people who go to bed hungry every night, every single night. Just imagine, even though we live in a world where we have enough food to feed everyone, there is still a staggering amount of people who are going hungry every single night. Right? What this means is 1 out of 9 people in the world is sleeping with a hungry stomach every single night, right? So those are some of the things that you need to ponder upon and think about. And that's why the concept of sadaqah is there. It is mustahab to give sadaqah before traveling, on Fridays, before carrying out any important work. In this month of Ramadan, it's actually highly encouraged to actually give out sadaqah or charity during this month, and then on special occasions, and so on and so forth. Right? Numerous benefits, obviously. It's and not just the benefits in this world, but there are like lots of spiritual benefits, including alleviating calamities and dispelling evil, illnesses, undignified death, and accidents, right? So those who give sadaqah will actually be provided with shade on the day of judgment. So again, protected from the wrath of Allah, shielded from the fire of hell. So those benefits are obviously there to encourage people to donate more and more. And one should ideally obviously give to the needy out of kindness, compassion, and really for the justice for all human beings, right? We can also study the lives of the family of the Holy Prophet, which has been, obviously, they're excellent role models, and specifically when it comes to giving charity as well. Our Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam narrates that his father, Imam Zainul Abidin, or the Imam, he used to go out in the dark carrying a stack on his back, going from door to door to the poor, knocking on each and giving to whoever came out to answer. He used to cover his face when giving to the poor in order that they may not recognize him. So imagine like a ruler doing the same thing, a ruler of a country, a ruler of a region. They basically motivate and inspire us to help others by choice, right? And it provides a very unique way of helping out others. You know, people are not able to recognize him, so they do not feel any kind of obligation to turn it away or to accept it. It's just there, and the Imam is providing them the support that they need, right? So again, sadaqah, you know, like is there so that people can actually help others by choice. But there are certain mandatory things as well, like wajib or mandatory things in Islam, which are zakah and khums. I've already talked about sadaqah, which is charity, and it's by choice. But now we'll talk about some of the mandatory stuff that we have to do. But before we do that, let's talk about a little story here as well from Imam Ali's time. There was an old Christian man who had worked all his entire life, and he had worked hard, but he was not able to save for his old age. And what happened was, as he became old, he also became blind. So old age, blindness, and poverty were factors that led to this man begging in order to survive. So he used to stand on a corner of the street in Kufa and beg for money. People had compassion for him, and they would give him a few alms every day, from which he was able to survive. But this is how he continued living his sad life. One day, Imam Ali saw him in that condition, and out of his concern for others, he inquired, you know, he asked others about the old man. The people who knew the old man came forward and informed Imam Ali that he was a Christian who had worked so hard, but now he's lost his eyesight, and he's no longer able to work. But he did work hard, you know, during his entire lifetime, but he did not have any savings, and that's why he was begging. So Imam Ali said, strange, until he had the strength, you benefited from him, and now you have left him on his own. His story shows how he had worked hard and contributed to the society. So this really tells us, and this is what Imam Ali was saying. His story shows that he had worked hard and contributed to the society, which when he had strength, therefore it is duty of the government and the society to support him, which he lives in. Go and give him a life pension from the state treasury. This was the Imam Ali's command and decision. He said that he should be given a life pension from the state. So again, Islamic society should be concerned about the welfare of all its members, whether they're Muslim or not. It should particularly be concerned about its seniors, especially those people who have actually worked hard and contributed to the society throughout their life, right? Okay, so now that we've talked about the story, we'll quickly go over some of the mandatory things that we have in the religion. So we've already talked about sadaqah. The other two things are, as I said, mandatory, zakah and khums. So what is zakah? It's wajib, or a mandatory tax, and it's one of the furu'id or branches of religion. There are two types of zakah. Obviously, one is you know, like a tax. The other one is zakat al-fitra. Because we're in the month of Ramadan, it's also particularly relevant because it actually is paid at the culmination of the month of Ramadan. So on the day of Eid al-Fitr, it is actually paid. The concept is really simple. When we say hungry, we kind of understand how others feel when they do not have money to put food on the table. This basically builds empathy amongst us as well. And as we are reaching the end of the month, it is advised and it's mandatory for us to pay a zakat of fitr. If you want to study in detail about the other zakah, which is wajib, which is a tax, it's actually on 10 items. When they reach a certain amount, those 10 items, I can quickly run through them: wheat, barley, dates, raisins, gold, silver, camels, cows, sheep, business goods based on Atiyah. So these are like those 10 items on which it is mandatory to, if they reach obviously a certain amount, then it is mandatory to pay tax on them. And the third mandatory thing is khums, which obviously means 1/5. It's again a mandatory tax that has been mentioned in the Quran. One of the verses, chapter number 8, verse number 41. وَعَلَمُوا أَنَّمَا غَنِمْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ فَأَنَّ لِلَّهِ خُمُسَهُ وَلِلرَّسُولِ وَلِذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ. I'm going to translate. And know that whatever thing you may come by, 1/5 of it is for Allah and for the Prophet and for the relatives and the orphans and for the needy and the traveler. So very clear. Allah is clearly mentioning who it is for and what is the portion of it. So it's 1/5, and for all those folks that we just studied. So again, it applies to khums, applies to 7 items, but really the most common one is the profit from earnings. So after you've deducted all your expenses from 1 year, you should pay 20% of your surplus as khums. So in the absence of Imam al-Mahdi, our 12th Imam, khums is actually paid to the mujtahid whom you follow. Half of that would go, so half of that money is actually used by the mujtahid to provide for the poor and needy people, for the establishment of religious organizations, for maintenance of scholars, and the other half is actually used to provide for the descendants of Rasulullah who are orphans, needy, and stranded travelers. So 2 use cases for this money. Okay, so this was the second of the mandatory ways toward a fair distribution. Again, I'm going to conclude this here. We really talked about how Islam believes in a fair distribution of wealth, why it considers this to be an important aspect of a society. And it obviously encourages us to work hard to acquire wealth, but in reality, Allah Ta'ala is really the real owner of all things. And people are his agents, right? And if they're rich, they're supposed to distribute their wealth towards human beings who need it the most. And then it is really necessary for all humans to have equal wealth, but it is not necessarily for humans for all humans to have equal wealth, but everyone should have a fair share. Everyone should be able to meet their basic needs, right? And then we talked about some of the ways. So the optional one is obviously sadaqah, which is charity. It's optional. People are encouraged to give sadaqah. And then the other 2 mandatory or wajib taxes are zakah and khums, which help ensure distribution of wealth to the needy. With this, I'm going to end this lecture here. And inshallah, see you tomorrow on another subtopic of our series, where the main topic is societal well-being. Thank you so much for listening. Allah Hafiz.